So, Robbie, how did you first find out about magic, or what was your first exposure to magic? Or tell me about your magic initiation.
You know, that's a tough question to answer. I'm not sure what my first exposure to it was.
Okay.
But, right, I mean, most of it is easily traced back to one of my earliest memories. I have a handful of early memories from about the time that I was 4, in that area. My family moved. We bought a house, and one of those memories involves driving up to the house for the first time. And the other memory involves the local church, which kind of makes sense, I guess. My family is not particularly religious.
Okay.
But I think my mom wanted to be. I think my mom tried to be. And in this memory, it's just myself, a very small child, and my mother in this church, which in hindsight seems really odd, but...
And what was it what was the magic bit to it? Like, so you're in the church, you're quite young, what's the, where did the magic arrive from, or what is the...
See, the magic didn't arrive until a lot later, but
okay.
I think that started the whole thing because, right, I mean, later on, the magic came through fiction first, right?
Okay.
Through popular culture. It made me aware of it, and that sent me looking for it.
Okay.
So one of the first places I went looking for it ended up being church.
Right.
Because that's where everybody tells you it is, right? That's where God is.
Sure. Yeah.
Surprisingly enough, I didn't find him there. But I kind of struck off on my own, I guess you would say. And drawing on fiction mostly. Although I probably could have found some things in the library. You know, this is before the internet, of course.
Sure.
That wonderful facilitator these days. Based on fiction. I got up to no good, really.
So when you were saying that you got into through fiction, what kind of age are you talking about at this? Like, what was it? Teenage? Is it like Lord of the Rings kind of teenage era, or is it earlier, later?
Very early teens, I'm going to say. I was a voracious reader. I got it from my parents, and right, this weird thing happened at school. Went to Catholic school for the first couple of years before my father pulled us out of there because the nuns said something to my brother that he didn't like.
Right.
But this weird thing happened.
You got it lucky.
Maybe. But this weird thing happened where they said that I was behind in reading, and it wasn't actually true. I was actually ahead of everybody. But I got stuck in a remedial reading group. And it had an enormous effect on me because, I read actually on my own at this age, and we're talking first grade. So anyway, that had a huge effect on me. And my parents were voracious readers. They had a large library of fiction. And so, I mean, from a very young age, I mean, I'm going to say even preteens, because I remember, going to book fairs. Did they have that when you were in school?
Book fairs, not really, no. Wouldn't be a thing. We had a guy in a van who came around with some books every couple of months. That was about the height of... kind of a book exposure we got at school. No, Ireland is quite backwards when it comes to things like that, especially when I was growing up.
Well, when I was young, they had a book. They called it a book fair. You would you'd go into the library, and there would be all these books available. And I was one of few who actually attended and bought the books. And I came home with some books very young that had an effect on me. One apparently was turned out to be a German folk tale that is pretty well known. it was sensationalized and translated into English and called The Satanic Mill.
Oh, right.
I'm not sure how they thought that was appropriate for right grammar school kids, because it's a German folktale. They those people didn't pull any punches, but it was actually a very good book, and I read it over and over and over, and I didn't get into Tolkien until much later, and I'm still not heavily into Tolkien.
Yeah, me neither.
Although I've read a lot of it. No, I'm going to say the biggest effect on my magic and how I view it is going to go to Ursula Le Guin and The Wizard of Earthsea.
Okay. I
read that probably a little bit later on, probably approaching teens, maybe early teens. And that particular story had a huge effect on me. Unfortunately, the second book in the series, and she admits herself, was not very good. And being a teenage boy dealing with burgeoning sexuality, which turns out to be different than everybody else, reading a book about feminism and sex from a female perspective really kind of ruined the whole thing for me. And
okay. Yeah.
So I didn't actually read the rest of the Earthsea books until much later.
Yeah, I've never read them at all. In fact, I didn't know about them until that RuneSoup episode that talked about them. Did not come up on my radar at all. But I'm not a huge fantasy kind of a guy, so it's probably not something I ever went looking for. But I'm surprised that when I did come across them, to see just how popular and how kind of famous they are for having not even remotely found the name familiar. I assume they're huge books, very popular.
Yeah, I mean they are. It's and I was actually kind of surprised to find later on that that she had the popularity that she had, because I really wasn't aware of her. Back in those days, the information wasn't that readily available to a teenager. You didn't you didn't know every little moment of your favorite authors or musicians' lives. But later on to discover that she was so popular and that she had written so much stuff, and frankly that she was so controversial. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest here and say it completely went over my head that the ethnic background of the characters in Earthsea, because she doesn't make a big deal of it. But yes, it's there. I mean, you go back and you read it now that someone's pointed it out. You go back and you say, yeah, okay, how did I miss that? Probably because she doesn't make a big deal about it, really.
Yeah, it's not kind of fundamental to the story or anything. It's just there. It's the characters. So tell me, so you went from getting to sort of see magic in fiction. So then what was your first experience to bunny ears, real magic, I suppose, real life magic? When did you realize that this might be a thing that actually exists in, the real world rather than just books?
Well, I made up some rituals and I performed them, and they worked.
Right.
As an adult now, I'd rather not say what they were about.
Well, without saying what they were about, what kind of made you have the idea that? Why did you think that it was worth trying? Like, you obviously thought that they might work. So what was the kind of lead up to that? Like, was it just, this works in a book, I'm going to see if it works in reality? Or had you some sort of intuition that maybe there was something more at play? Or what was the thought process?
I always knew there was something, right? I went looking for God because I knew there was something. I knew I was missing something. I knew it was there, but I couldn't find it. And nowhere, part of that was the fiction, right? It seemed so prevalent in popular culture and even in everyday culture. There are elements of it. It's there. It's everywhere. Yet when you go looking for it, it's not particularly easy to find, at least not genuinely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew it was there, and I went looking for it, and this it was more experimentation than anything else. It was more, I mean, this looks easy. Let's get some candles together and do a thing here, and right, like I said, it worked. I mean, literally flying by the seat of my pants. Make it up as you go along, and right, there's a handful of things in my teenage years that I did and produced results. Right, a lot of it's that beginner's luck experience, which seems to happen to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It did teach me, though, that I'm best at it when I am emotionally invested.
Oh, right. Okay, because I find the opposite. So that's interesting. So that, like, by that I mean that the more I want something, say, the less likely it is to manifest in a way, and the less I care about it, or the less importance I put on it, the easier it is for it to show up. Would you find the opposite then, or what exactly do you mean by emotionally invested?
I have the best results when I can deeply involve in an emotion while I am doing a working.
Okay. So in the actual magic ritual itself.
Yes. Right.
Is that like a kind of thing, an activation thing, like you would have, like, say, you have the gnosis thing in chaos magic, or some sort of extreme emotion. Is that what you mean?
I do think it's part of it, right? You come across it in a little bit in Pete Carroll, more in Vitimus with his hands-on chaos magic.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess it's kind of a current in the whole NLP sort of approach, with memory and emotion and involving as much of your consciousness as possible in the moment. And it really does seem to work for me the best when, I've done two things in particular. One, a local politician threatened my partner, threatened his job, and that made me very, 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 very angry. And so I did something about it, and it definitely worked rather spectacularly. And I somewhat regret that I may have laid a curse on a couple of generations of his family, but
somewhat regret, just somewhat.
In the end, he got what he deserved, and rather publicly, because it turned out that he liked to throw his weight around, and what he did that impacted me was just a small example of that.
So when you're saying, so we have the idea of that you're emotionally connected or emotionally in the moment of the ritual. What's your thoughts then on the whole fire and forget, or the lust for result and stuff like that? Does that come into it? Do you find an effect with that, or what's your approach?
I'm not particularly good, to be perfectly honest, at the whole fire and forget approach. I've had some success with it. I'm shite at sigils.
Nice.
I really am, and I've done a lot of them. I have done a lot of them with a lot of different approaches, and it just does not. There's something about it that doesn't work for me, right? And I mean, following Gordon White's approach, it's not difficult, right? His methodology is incredibly straightforward, and I'm with him. It seems like it ought to work. It is theoretically sound, but it largely just doesn't work for me. And I acknowledge that some of that might be part of the whole don't attack a walled city thing, not picking the best targets.
Okay, as in targets that are too hard to get, or is that what you mean? Like the difficulty level you've been aiming for with sigils is too high?
I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it, but also, right, sometimes aiming at moving targets. I don't know.
Right, okay.
It's difficult. It's difficult to quite put your finger on it because he's right. He tosses things off. No pun intended. All right, he tosses these things off, and you can't always nail down. Well, what the fuck do you mean? What's a good target? You know,
yeah. I think my kind of experience with the sigils is definitely the improved from having read an awful lot of Rune Soup and even before his course and stuff like that, the whole shoaling and the robofish and all that. But it still ultimately is no better than, for me, or worse than any other kind of method. And I can't, I would love to have the success that Gordon seems to have with his sigils, because he seems to do really well with it, and some other people just seem to, really excel. It makes me wonder that, when you're playing like an RPG, a game, and certain people have certain, like a class system, and like how certain people more kind of tuned to sigil activation, some people are more kind of like, healing or something, and you're kind of putting yourself into a kind of a losing race or losing battle by doing magic that's not kind of something that's inherent in you, or is it a case that it's like any kind of a skill, some people are just going to be better at, football than other people at that type of thing? Do you think is there a talent element to magic, I suppose, is my question that I'm asking.
I absolutely do think that there is, right? And because, pardon me, Alan Moore, no, not every cunt can do it. Not everyone is able to do it. You can see that just by, right, interacting with people who are interested. There are all kinds of people who talk a good game, but it's pretty clear from the talk that that's all they're doing. It requires a certain mindset. It requires practice, and I do think there is a talent involved. I think it is. It's both a talent and a skill.
Okay.
I think some people are naturally better at it than others.
Okay. So in the kind of, there's a natural witch or like that kind of thing, or is it just not so?
No,
okay.
Let's not go that far. I absolutely will not go that far because yes, you can make a witch. Yes, you absolutely can. You're not born one. That's I cannot accept that.
Okay.
But right when we were talking about this talk, you rattled off a couple of questions, and the very first one was, what do you think magic is?
Okay.
And I had to honestly sit down and say, I've never really thought of that. I've not put my own definition or my own explanation of what I think it is. And right, of course, everybody's familiar with the Crowley version and the art and science crap.
Yeah.
I don't like those definitions at all.
Okay.
I did for a while, right? I accepted them back when in my Crowley phase. Everybody has one, right?
Oh, sure, yeah. And a Buddhist phase, it seems, too.
So I thought about it.
Yeah.
And for me, right, you have to take those sort of definitions and put them aside because they're irrelevant. They're not an actual description of what it is, right? And to me anyway, this is of course my opinion. It's a sentient thing. It's meaning it is a practice of sentient creatures. I wanted to say people, I wanted to say humans, but I don't know. I don't know that other sentient creatures don't practice magic. But it is a way that sentient creatures interact with the cosmos. At its most fundamental level, that's what it is. It's not a science. It's not an art. It's it's more of a feeling approach. Sure, you can learn it from a book, but that's not really how you go about it. And as Gordon repeatedly says, it's a performative art. It most certainly is. It is.
But it can be. Do you think it's performative in a physical sense, or do you mean performative like can you be performative in a psychological sense, or are you coming from the kind of idea, say the more Jason Miller type of thing, that materia has actual magic properties, and like the ritual itself is the magic thing, or is it that you're trying to, that chaos magic idea of that you're trying to, instill the belief in yourself by doing these things? What's your kind of thoughts on that? Or is it both?
I believe that it's both, because magic is in everything.
Yeah.
Right? It is up to the magician to find it. And there are a lot of clues, and there are a lot of people who have gone before us who've left us ideas about how things are magically operant, what their effects are, how they interact. I mean, literally performative. It is something that you do. It is a performance, and that can involve props. It doesn't have to involve props, but and depending on the artist, the magician, do you work well with props or do you not? In your one-man show, do you have a lot of props? Are you Carrot Top or are you not?
Yeah.
And I have no idea where that came from, but
So we were just go back slightly a wee bit, and you were saying that so teenage years, you have come this kind of decision that you believe that there is some sort of magic. You've been looking for God, all of these things. You've tried some rituals. You've done this. You've seen that they've worked. So what was your next step? Where did you go looking for? What was the books you went to, or where was did you go back to church? Did you find some organization, or what was then after you had the realization from doing the performance that you could affect reality? What next?
Right, I tried church, but in a non-traditional way, because for me it is a bit of a solitary approach, and I'm not sure entirely where that comes from. But I try to find God through prayer, and again, I'm not sure where that comes from, because it's not It's not really something that. Well, I guess maybe it comes from my paternal grandmother. It may very well. She was, of anyone in my family, she was probably the most religious.
Okay.
But it was not, other than observing some of the folk Italian sort of stuff that she did around the house, and occasionally going to church with her. Right, one of my best memories actually is going to church with my grandmother, and going in the back room and her buying candles from the priest.
Okay. Like the high-powered candles, the secret under the shelf candles.
I absolutely, I keep meaning to find out if I can still do that. No, the story just gets better. I ran into a fellow in a graveyard, and an actual person, not a ghost, but I was in a graveyard down the street where my grandparents are buried, actually, and he came over and he talked to me, and apparently he is his wife is buried there, and he's related to the priest who moved the cemetery from Woonsocket to Pawtucket, and he works at St. Cecilia's, which is the church. And he told me that actually, yes, they do still sell candles there.
Oh, wow, cool. So you definitely have to check that out.
Right, I have to do that. Yeah. I have to go get them. But back to the question. It was a solitary thing. I went into the churches alone and prayed and tried to find God that way. And this was when Wicca was becoming a thing, and the whole nature religion thing. And I also went to the park here locally, and right, the pond there, the body of water, and I tried there as well. And no matter how much I wanted to find God in either of those places, I didn't.
Okay.
So, right, the next thing was more magic, really, and that is when I did a little illusionist work. I practiced some stage magic.
Okay.
And while that was fun, I knew that it was a trick, right? I knew it wasn't the real thing, and I still enjoyed it though. But that led me to the tarot cards, because the magic shop I frequented had an actual tarot deck there.
Oh, wasn't the stage magic shop?
Yes.
Had a tarot deck.
Yes.
Right. Great. Yeah.
So I got my first tarot deck.
Was it a Coleman Raider Smith, or what was it?
It was not, actually. It's a relatively well-known but kind of odd deck called the Aquarian Tarot.
Okay.
It's a very 70s sort of thing, and images from it pop up in the most bizarre of places. I was watching a television show on Hulu, and in it the main characters go back in time, and he pops up in a room, and there are 3 framed cards from this deck hanging in the room. And it just right, it shows up in the weirdest of places, because it's just, the art is very striking, and it's
I'm not familiar with it at all, I have to say. I'm not that familiar with tarot decks in general, though, to be quite honest.
no, it is. Sorry, go ahead.
I assume you still have it, do you? It's still one of your possessions, or?
Actually, it is not.
Oh.
I do have a copy of the deck that was gifted to me later on. I gave it away, and I'm not sure why I gave it away, but it was a meaningful gift. I gave it to a friend.
Right.
And I had largely moved on from that particular deck. Once I got my hands on the Crowley Harris deck and learned to use it, and learned its rather unique nature,
certainly.
for the longest time, that was the only deck that I used. And I had many. I'm not one of those huge fanatical tarot collectors, but I have a number of decks. And it was the tarot that really was my first doorway into finding the real stuff. It led me to Crowley, and then the Golden Dawn, which was fascinating for a while, but
Yeah. ...
Yeah. It's not. It's a late 19th century, late 18th century. I always forget those confused.
Yeah, me too.
Curiosity. Sure, we owe a lot to the people who formed the Golden Dawn. They did a great job of waking some stuff up, but their system's obtuse. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, anybody who's a Golden Dawn person out there. No offense intended, right? We owe them a great debt, but it doesn't work for everybody. Right? That's a better way of putting it. Right? And it's even with the wonderful books, Self-Initiation into the Golden Dawn tradition, it really doesn't work without a group.
Sure. Yeah. It's an organization magic. Like, it's a kind of, you need to be part of the, I suppose, part of the order and be working it. It's like to be part of it, you need to be part of it. It's not really a solo kind of thing.
Absolutely. And right, that isn't for everyone.
No, certainly not. Or available to everyone, even the people who are interested. There's no Golden Dawn in 50 miles where I live. And it's like there's it's just not that. And I suppose the Golden Dawn the many Golden Dawns that are out now all have their own little flavors and their own little eccentricities and possible, I don't know, egomaniacs involved in it too. But I suppose that's just group thing. Did you get so you got to the Golden Dawn and Crowley and that kind of stuff? What about stuff like Theosophy or like New Age type stuff? Did you manage to bypass that, or did you get caught up in it, or was there anyone else on the go other than just your ceremonial magic?
No, I largely bypassed all of that stuff. I was probably influenced by Crowley. I was kind of anti-religion. And because of in my own experience, I hadn't found anything there. And admittedly, after trying, I hadn't found anything. I would learn later on that I hadn't tried hard enough, but that's...
Okay. By trying, do you mean, are you doing lesser banishing rituals or the pentagram, are you doing star rubies, or like what was the kind of, what did your kind of affair with Crowley and the Golden Dawn, what did it look like practically? Like, what were you doing?
Well, I was talking about religion, where I...
Oh, sorry, okay.
That's okay, where I hadn't found God, where I hadn't learned to pray yet. I thought I knew how to pray. And,
okay.
Right, so Crowley led me to very anti-religion and more science, more practicality, more, I'm not quite sure how to put a descriptor on that attitude towards magic, because it comes from that era, and it's very, or at least to me now, it is very much an element of that era, of that moment in time. Right, you read some Jung, and you read some Crowley and others of that era, and they all, I don't know, they all sort of taste the same. And
right, yeah, no, I understand. And do you think that's more than just the kind of the fashion of language that books were written in, or like, do you think it's the same current, if you want to use that word? Or,
I think it is the same current, right? I mean,
yeah.
And to take two people like that who are so different, Crowley and Jung, and to see them both saying the same thing, in essence, that, right, they're about the great work. They're about a great work. They're doing great things. There's a pomposity to it that rubs me the wrong way.
Sure.
And
yeah,
it's funny, right? I've still been thinking about the whole, what is magic to you? How do you practice? And right, there's a quote from a video game of all things, but it's right. It's still collaborative fiction. You're still telling a story, and I'm paraphrasing, but the a character says to you as the main character in talking about the elements of the game story, some posturing will be required. And that has just always struck me as a perfect description of some of the stuff that you have to do.
Sure.
And
that makes sense.
I'm not sure how that works for me, where I absolutely accept that is true. In magic, some posturing is required. All you have to do is to read the grimoires to understand that absolutely some posturing is required.
And is that to assert authority, or what do you feel is is that to put yourself as the center of the universe? Is that to claim your heritage? Why do you think is that needed?
I don't know, but it seems to touch on a lot of different things, right? You just rattled off 3 without even trying.
I know, yeah. Well,
right?
yeah.
There is definitely some posturing required, and it's how well can you wear that hat? I don't. Can you pull it off and remain grounded at the same time?
Well, it's not the challenge, and that's what so many kind of, I suppose, historical magicians, particularly someone like Crowley, probably didn't do very successfully. In that you would not you would not ever claim that Crowley was a grounded man.
No, absolutely not. Right? I mean, he wore the hat well, but he couldn't. He definitely could not keep it under control. We've kind of gone far afield here, and I'm not sure where we came from to get here.
Well, where we can go back to is because the theme seems to be that your I suppose your magic mission, in a sense, was to find God rather than to find magic. So we've got as far as Crowley in that, and you're still in your kind of seeking or searching for God. And you mentioned a bit about saying that you hadn't learned how to pray properly at this point. So we could probably go down that kind of route a bit. From Crowley, where did your seeking of God go next? What was like?
Oh well, yeah. Then comes the neo-pagan phase.
Okay.
That was it was fun. I actually got involved with some friends of mine who had become neo-pagans, and the whole having a community, having a group. Because again, there's Wicca for the solitary practitioner, which was a huge thing. When you're finding your way, in particular, having people to talk to and rely on, and having a group is very good. And although I've come back to my original solitary position, and I'm not big on group workings, and don't necessarily look for a lot of community, at least when it comes to the actual practice of magic. And the two things, magic and the search for God, have come together. They were always intertwined, but they've come together I think in the way that they always were intended to, from the beginning for me. Sorry, yeah.
So was your search for God search for the kind of proof of God, or were you starting from a point of I definitely know there's a God, I just want to talk to him, or what was the trust, or what was the the main kind of reason? Like what is your search for God? What to kind of clarify that a bit?
Right, it's because it sounds a little pompous, doesn't it?
No, it's not. No, not pompous at all. I just think it could be. You could mean something very different from what I might say search for God, or person B's search for God. I think it's a very kind of subjective, I think, experience, particularly if you're not doing the church thing. And I'm just interested in what it actually means for you.
Right. We touched on it a little bit. It was apparent to me that there was something. Right. There are too many clues. There are too many pointers. There's too much in popular culture all around you that says there's something more. Right. That alludes or directly talks about and touches upon the supernatural, for lack of a better term. And I wanted to experience it. I knew that it had to be there. It had to be there. Just everybody talked about it, right? And not always in fiction either, right? There are people. Yeah. There are true accounts. Sorry, I'm making air quotes, which I hate to do, but right, you always got to take those true accounts with a grain of salt. But
there was no hesitation in you. You knew it was true. It wasn't a seeking, like in Gordon White's kind of sense of you weren't trying to become invincible. You felt you already were invincible. You were trying to interact with this kind of thing.
That is a pretty good way of putting it. There was never any question. There really wasn't any question for me. It was there. It's just how do you get there? How do you find it?
Okay.
How do you feel the presence? How do you interact with it?
So could you share any kind of then moments that you feel that you have done that? Or are they like, I know these can be quite personal kind of moments and stuff, but is there some standout moment where you knew you
Absolutely.
were definitely on the right track? Okay, cool, great.
Right, and it took a long time. It wasn't easy. But there are two moments in particular, and it's odd that I joke about my neo-pagan past, and I don't embrace it. But two of the moments that stand out for me actually do have a strange sort of duality to them, in that the first moment, the first presence that I felt was distinctly feminine. And
Okay.
I liken it to Isis. She has always, since I was a child, for some reason, Isis has spoken to me. Not literally, but the archetype, the what she represents, and I've studied her a great deal. But there was, and I do not remember the particulars of this moment. I've written about it in some poetry, but I don't remember the particulars of the moment. I just know I was in dire need, and she came to me, literally. I was deep in prayer, and sounds a lot like meditation to most folks, right? Prayer and meditation,
Okay.
they really largely are the same thing. And she came to me. She told me that everything was going to be okay. Literally told me everything was going to be okay. And she wrapped her arms and her wings around me, and I felt it.
Okay.
It was one of the most unique experiences I have ever had in my life. I literally felt her put her arms around me and then her wings, and I knew that it was going to be okay.
Okay. And I assume it was okay then afterwards.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I honestly, because it was such a peak experience, I do not recall what it was that had me in such a state.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, because I suppose it becomes insignificant after that kind of experience.
Right? It does. It was.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the first one, and the second one required a great deal of reflection before I actually put a masculine tag on this one. But again, it was one of those deep in prayer, deep in meditation moments, and I experienced a light that came from elsewhere. I want to say directionally behind me, but that's not accurate.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to say behind me because it came through me. It came through my chest and
Okay.
proceeded to take me apart, atom by
Okay.
atom. Right?
In a Dr. Manhattan type sense, that kind of.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, you learn, right? If you study enough, right, you learn about the different ways in which this can happen and how common an experience this is. Right, being dismembered by demons.
Sure.
Is a common shamanic theme, and
Sure.
right. But it literally deconstructed me. It took me apart, and I actually I did not let the process complete because it scared the shit out of me. No, there's no two ways about it. It absolutely terrified me.
And do you feel it in a sense it was a missed opportunity, or did you get the result, the intended result from that by stopping it too early? I mean, or what?
I think I got the intended result.
Right. Okay.
I absolutely do think I got the intended result. But I mean, right, we've talked about this before, you and I, about right, when these things happen, if you don't ride them, they tend to fall apart.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's right. That was part of the lesson. Absolutely, was when it happens, you got to ride it. You absolutely have to ride it. And unfortunately, I didn't at that time. It was so right. It was so engrossing and so terrifying that it threw me out. And I wish that I had written it a little bit more. But right, again, in reflection, much later on, that it kind of it fell into the whole neo-pagan duality of this was the Father's love, that bright, penetrating light that can reduce you to nothing. That is so often the masculine side of God.
The destructor. Yeah. And how far apart were these two kind of incidences? Were they, is it years apart? Is it part of some sort of initiation, or what's your thoughts looking back on it now?
I think they were both initiations, but they were years apart.
Years apart. Okay.
Yeah, they were definitely years apart. These things, right? They don't happen to me all that often, right? Probably because I chase them a little bit too much, right?
Sure.
Mister did almost 2 years of meditating every single day.
Yeah.
I do chase them a little bit, and that's been the problem since the beginning. Chasing it. Sometimes, a lot of time, you got to let go and let it come. And
well, that's interesting that you say that, because going back to what we started with, where you're saying that your most effective magic is when you're so invested in it and when you're so emotionally thing in it. But then it also has that kind of side that if you chase it, that it can kind of start working against you. So I suppose there's the balance type thing in that, of the emotional intensity. And I suppose that's what people talk about with the lust for result thing. That's an odd type of statement that's, I think, not fully understood too well, but it seems to point a bit at that in what you're saying now. Or do you feel that?
I hear it, but I'm not, right? It feels like these are two different things, though, right? There's right, they both fall under the umbrella of magic, of mysticism, right? But the spiritual, for lack of a better term, experiences, the mystical experiences happen. Magic, when you're, when you're after something, when you're doing something, not chasing an experience. When you're after a practical result, that's what I'm trying to say here. They're different things.
But how, could you not then approach kind of creating a mystical experience in the same way you would approach it, like getting into a car? Why does one seem to have whatever lust for result thing to it and one doesn't? Is it because that you're more focused with wanting a new car or whatever? A terrible example, but it's the one that's used. But
I don't know. And this could be right. That could be a failing of my own in thinking or expecting that they just happen. Right, because they're
well, it's not. There's a thing. It's drilled into you, particularly in more kind of meditation, kind of maybe an Eastern approach, or even in a kind of Christian sense of that you shouldn't chase these things. That and it's in a meditation sense, when you're in the Buddhist meditation sense, when you're going through the different kind of stages, the attainment of these things are kind of seen as don't pay attention to any of that. That's another kind of thing on the path that you can get trapped in, or you can get. It's like the cities that they talk about in the Yoga Sutras, where they say don't pay attention to these powers that suddenly come to you because they're a trap. So I think we can kind of have a guilt kind of feeling around these things, that there shouldn't be something that we want to pursue. It's kind of when I'm deserving enough of it, that it'll arrive, kind of thing. Is that something you think is in your thing, or is that something you've managed to avoid?
No, I think it's probably an undercurrent, because you're right. It's impossible to escape. It's always there, no matter what track you're following. There's always an element of that there, and that's kind of insidious in my opinion.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. Yeah.
And I've practiced a lot of meditation, and I've looked into different groups and different things, and I have always run up against when they start telling you what you can wear and what you can eat and who you can have sex with, or that you can have sex at all. That's when you turn around and say goodbye.
Yes,
because they're just interested in controlling you.
Yeah, I think suggestion can be fine. Suggest that maybe you have good sexual practice or good relationship or good money kind of management, fine. But I think when you start demanding it or saying that this is the only way, I think you're in you're firmly in cult territory. Like, that's just it. Like,
right, and I think a lot of those restrictions are absolutely along the same lines. Who are you exactly to tell me that this is not something that I should explore?
Yes. Well, I assume that some of them are like masters or have some sort of learning, and I think it originally would have come from the teacher-student kind of relationship, these type of things, when that was the norm. But it's kind of assuming that there's a universal experience to all this, and I'm not convinced of that for a start. But I'm not sure that it's particularly... being that I'm a chaos magician, I'm very obsessed with the subjective experience of things and the subjective meaning behind things. And I think that when you start getting into all of these type of rules, I think while it might work percentage-wise for more people, I think there's an awful lot of people or an awful lot of areas where it can kind of dampen things or, be the wrong approach to things. So, it's this kind of universalism of these rules that I find I rebel against somewhat. How exactly did you... Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, I can get behind that. Absolutely. I agree. I think there are universal elements, right? I mean, some of...
Yeah.
But I don't think every experience is universal, and even though it might have universal elements, it's gonna mean something different to me than it does to you, because
exactly that.
Because no matter how much we might be connected or how much we might be, crystallized bits of the same consciousness, we're still different.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's kind of ignored a bit too much in certain areas. So with that in mind, how did you get then? So neo-pagan, was chaos magic next, or how did you find your way to chaos magic? Or
where chaos magic was next.
Okay.
Right, I did the neo-pagan thing for a few years, and the ceremony of it got me better than the ceremonial magic, because there was a little, the whole Golden Dawn thing, there was a little too much reliance on props and a little too much reliance on secrets. And, with the neo-pagan thing, you could get away with less props, and they didn't have to be quite so...
exact.
Yeah. And... So, the ritual got me better, and there was certainly a freer element to it, right? I am still a huge fan of the works of Scott Cunningham, and he doesn't get the credit that he deserves because he was a smart guy and he did a lot of research, right? I still rely on his books on incense, oils, and brews.
Sure. Herbalism.
And I know he did his research because I found the research, right? I've looked at his bibliography. I've picked certain books from his bibliography and seen where some of the stuff comes from. He didn't always combine the stuff well, but he deserves more credit than he gets these days. He was a huge Llewellyn author, and it kind of falls into that whole ethos.
I think so. Yeah. It's like funny, people like to really hate on Llewellyn, but they sell an awful lot of books, so like people are buying them. There's that too,
Yeah, absolutely. Right. There are sometimes you got to find the gems in the pile, and he was definitely one of them. But that introduced me to creating my own incense and things, which has become a passion. I was always enamored of incense for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why. My mother burned some around the house every now and then, but that is not the that can't be the sole explanation. It was so rare that she did.
Right.
That.
Well, what about in churches and stuff when you have your frankincense? Like that's, I suppose, most people's first introduction to incense, isn't it?
To be perfectly honest, I don't remember it from church until much later on in my life, where I went to a funeral, and clearly I'd been to funerals before. This is the first time that I remember actually experiencing the great big swinging censer and the clouds of smoke, and I was like, right on, you know.
Here we go.
Why don't they do that more often? Of course, but at that point, I knew about the psychotropic effects of frankincense, so I was all for it. But yeah, I don't remember that earlier on. I never experienced that in a church setting that I remember until much later, until it was already a thing for me. So yeah, I cannot put my finger on where that comes from, right? I mean, I've been listening to you dissect yourself and pull apart your personality for the last couple of months here, and I'm sorry, there are several things about me that I have no idea where the heck they came from. Right,
well, that's good. Yeah, I'm looking for mine.
My parents are so rational. So, I mean, my mom would be a witch if she wasn't so rational.
All right.
She is. She certainly has the aesthetic for it. And I didn't learn until just recently that they both do not believe in an afterlife at all.
Okay.
Not one whit. Just think that it's over. You know, you're dead. You're dead. I'm trying to convince them otherwise. And over the last few years, I've introduced them to a little bit of Gordon White, a little Rupert Sheldrake, a little who's the other guy there? Damn, it's escaping me.
Dean Radin's also good.
Yep. Right. I mean, the scientists, which will trying to appeal to their rational side by showing them, right, there are scientists who are convinced, right, that there's something else, right, that there's more to this. When I took a long trip with my dad, we drove down to Florida, and I made him listen to I think it was the Dean Radin episode of Rune Soup, and he enjoyed it. He had a little bit of trouble, he admitted, in conceiving of the thought that the sun might have a consciousness. But other than that, he enjoyed it. Right, and the point was, right, they're such rational beings, and the only people who I can point to in my family who had something of a religious side would have been my grandmothers, maternal and paternal, but they never really expressed it to me. It didn't. I didn't join them in anything, so I don't know where this streak in me comes from. It doesn't come from my family, and they're
And you had no friends when you were a kid who were into religion or magic or anything else?
Absolutely not.
Right. That's cool. That's interesting.
I am definitely an outlier around here for this.
Well, maybe, Robbie, you were born a witch, even though you dislike that as an idea.
I suppose it's possible.
Yeah. So, how does your magic look now? What's going on currently? Where are you? What's your thoughts? Where are you? What are you reading? If you're not doing sigils, what are you doing? All of those type of things.
I'm not doing anything practical right now. Right. In your first talk with Sepherion there, he talked about projects. All right, I've been doing a lot of projects. I did the whole meditate every day. I did that for a long time, and that was my practice for the most part. I mean, I have a daily practice, which is very small, involves a little bit of ancestor worship. Not worship, but acknowledge and feeding of the ancestors.
a remembrance.
Yeah, and some prayers that I say every day. Isis is in my prayers every day, and more often than not, Hermes, who is right, another one that spoke to me when I was very small. Right, we kind of skipped that hole where I went down the mythology hole for a while, but right, those are the remnants of an early search into ancient mythology for looking for God. I found Isis and Hermes along the way, and they've kind of stuck with me along with Hecate, and have just keep coming back into my life in the most amazing and poignant ways. But those are the daily practice is simple, straightforward, and I haven't done anything practical in a while because I'm doing these bigger things. I'm doing these things where I've got 3 months left of a year-long project. Where
oh wow,
right, and you kind of started that. You kicked it off with the journey, which I did for 6 months.
All right,
which I did for 6 months, and it kind of got to me. And admitted
as it was designed to do.
Right, it clearly was designed to get to you, and I was enjoying it. I was finding some interesting things, but it got claustrophobic, and I had to step back and say, you know what, I'll come back to this at some point, but this is not for me right now. But yeah, I mean, it spurred me on, and that's. The whole keeping up with the meditation. And while I was just meditating every day, I still did practical bits here and there. For the longest time, I was doing a regular ritual from, do you know Cadmus at all?
No.
He wrote a book, which I really need to review. But I was first introduced to him because of a ritual that he wrote and that was published. What is it? Gods and Revolutionaries. I can't even remember the name of the website right now, and I should. Anyway, it's
it's Gods and Radicals.
Gods and Radicals, yes, those.
Radical. Yeah.
Which I hate those people. I got into it when I was first introduced to their website and the stuff that they do. It was an article that I took great umbrage with, and got into an argument with the author and with one of the editors, and with no ending satisfaction, I must say.
There rarely is in those incidents, I found.
Right, but they were still in my periphery, and I'm not sure how I stumbled upon this article that Cadmus had written. It was a ritual to Tyche or Fortuna, and it involved bits of the PGM, and it's called Luck of the Times. And I ran into it at just the right moment. Right, I was deep into the PGM style stuff at the time, and Tyche and Fortuna, and I've never actually asked him. Right, I met him at the Salem Summer Symposium, which was fantastic.
All right. Who is it again? It's the
Cadmus, Kadmus. He goes by that single name, Cadmus.
No, he's not come up. Will you send me some stuff on him, please?
I absolutely will.
Yeah, great.
Right, and he published a book through the Gods and Radicals Press, which is fantastic. Right, again, I read it. I need to write a review. I promised him I would. So anyway, right, I was doing that for the longest time. Every full moon, I was doing that. But right now, I'm not doing anything practical. I'm doing this year-long thing where I'm just praying every single day. Right, it's if you haven't figured it out, I'm big on ordeals, apparently. I am big on, devotion, which is not the best word, but it's a good one. It's going out of your way to do something specific. You know, I have had to be up at dawn every single day since last March.
Right.
And some days it's not a stretch, But those days approaching the summer solstice when dawn is
4 a.m.
exactly, those were some tough months when dawn is that
I can
early.
imagine.
And right, you're up because you've got to do something for 10 minutes. It's not like.
And would you stay up or would you go back to bed?
I can't. I am unable to go back to bed. So I'll be glad when this is over, but I'll also be glad that I did it.
Yeah.
And
but then you'll probably go straight into doing an 18-month Abramelin ritual or something, wouldn't it?
right, and you know what? If Abramelin didn't require me to completely shut myself off from the rest of the world,
maybe so.
I'd absolutely do it.
Yeah.
I think. But I apparently I am big on that sort of thing. I am big on something that you have to go out of your way to do. I am big on the idea of practice, the idea of discipline, of you need to do something. You have to put in the work. You've got to show that you're willing to do it. Right? I mean, my second experience that we talked about earlier of the light coming through me and taking me apart, that happened. Absolutely. I know it happened because I was meditating constantly. Because I wasn't looking for anything really so much. So there's your no loss the result thing. It was just I'm going to do this every single day. I am just going to do this every single day. And I was practicing Tai Chi at the time, and I was doing that every single day. And I think that's part of why it happened then, because I was in the midst of a practice, and I wasn't so much thinking about what am I getting out of this other than this is something that I do. It's something that I do every day. And, you know, even if the dividends aren't necessarily readily apparent, I know that it's doing something. There's a change.
Well, you see, here's the problem. We live in a capitalist society, so we think that everything has to have a dividend or it's not worth doing. And I think that kind of approach to say something like meditation or to magic is probably magic doesn't always have to be results-based magic, I don't think. You know, you can just do something because it's like your ancestor work, where every day you remember your ancestors for no reason other than to do that.
No, absolutely, right. I mean, sure, in the back of my mind, there is that building that relationship for when I need to call on them. But also, right, it is more than that for me. It may have started that way. It may have been, right, this is a common practice and it's valuable and it's beneficial. It's absolutely become more than that, right? I visit them in the graveyard, which is not something that I would do before. And I guess I've kind of changed an opinion that I had when I was young, right after I lost my maternal grandmother and my paternal grandfather, and I met my current partner all in the space of 2 months.
Oh, wow.
Right? And you know what? Now that I think about it, that has got to be when I had that experience of ISIS.
Right.
It has to have been. It also happens to be the one time in my life where I actually experienced a ghost. But
oh, wow.
right, my paternal grandfather who had just passed away, stopped in and visited me, and it was the most. Right, it was one of those rare experiences. Right, I was busy, I was doing something, I was keeping myself occupied because, right, I was a mess. I lost my grandmother, and I met my partner and lost my grandfather in rapid succession. So I was distracting myself, and I was underneath my bed at the time and cleaning things out, and my grandfather came in the room, came in the house through the walls, passed through the bathroom into my room, checked on me, and said, "Oh, yeah, you're doing all right," and then took off.
Wow.
Anyway, right? How did I get there? Right? Shortly after that, right? I visited both my maternal grandmother's grave and my grandparents, my paternal grandfather, and I came to the conclusion that they weren't there.
Okay.
I guess I've changed my opinion on that.
Right.
Probably because I wasn't paying attention. Right. Back to the whole I hadn't learned to pray yet. I hadn't learned to.
Or your definition of being there has changed.
That's possible.
Yeah. Have you looked at that period of your time on your chart, on your astrological chart? Like, is there anything kind of interesting going on around that time?
No, and I probably should. Right, I probably should. Right, because I have. I've definitely adopted the belief that there is, and there's that word. I don't do beliefs. I am firmly on board with Jake Stratton Kent in having working parameters.
Nice.
I try not to believe things, but sometimes it's hard to escape that word. I definitely accept a lot of astrology in my set of working parameters. It's shown itself to me to definitely have strong indicators. All right, I dated 3 Tauruses in a row before I finally chose one to keep forever. And Taurus is my 7th house, the house of relationships, and Venus is in Taurus for me. So my chart pretty much said, yeah, you're gonna end up with one, even though we are such opposites. But no, that is a good idea. I probably should go back and look at that time because there's probably something right now.
Well, it may be. I think it'd be as significant as if there's absolutely nothing there as well. You know that it's because then you're going from creating, from things being predetermined in some ways to creating your event yourself. So either way, it's kind of interesting. The only kind of thing that wouldn't be interesting if there's something there, something not, that you could, it's just kind of that middle ground that tells you nothing.
Right. I'm not sure that I accept the idea that it's predetermined. Right? Because it's not. It's predetermined suggests a concrete occurrence of events that someone could literally predict, and I don't think that's the case. But I think you can see the shape of things.
Yeah, and I think also looking at it has to change it too.
Oh, absolutely! Right there, you can't escape that. Right? We haven't gone down the rabbit hole of quantum physics at all.
No.
Right? And yes, definitely, the observer effect has something to do with all of this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good place to kind of stop because it's a good time, and we've left enough for. Our next conversation. There's plenty more to go to. Is there anything though that you would like to, impart to everyone else? That something you've learned along the way, and then of course, give out your websites and your tell people about your artwork and all of this type of stuff too.
Right, I hadn't thought about that. Practice. That's do the magic. Right, you have to. You absolutely have to. If you want it to work, if you want to learn something, if you want to be involved, you have to do the work. That has been my experience, right? Like I said, when some of these things have happened to me, the one time I feel like I had genuine spirit contact from something that I still can't explain happened because I was meditating every day. My experience of being taken apart happened because I was meditating every day. There's something to that. There's something to having a practice. No matter what that practice is, whatever the shape of it is for you, you need to find what it looks like for you. And you need to do it. No matter what, you need to devote yourself to doing it because it's who you are. You live the magical life. Right? This thought has been going through my head because I've been going, right? I've been trying to get out. I've been trying to get out of the solitary thing. Like Austin Coppock said a while back now, showing up in person is a revolutionary act. And I've been trying to do that. I went to the Salem Summer Symposium. I've gone to a couple of events locally here, getting out into the crowd and experiencing what other people living the magical life looks like.
Yeah.
And I kind of lost the thread of what I was saying there, but definitely.
Well, it was just about having a practice and doing that kind of stuff. I think it's great advice, and it's something I think a lot of people. It's getting that kind of stage from. It's great to read books. It's great to argue with people on the internet. It's great to have all the ideas, but you have to start fucking doing something at some point, or you're not really doing magic.
Right. Absolutely, and it doesn't always have to be practical. Yeah. That's the thing. It does not always have to be practical. My regular practice at this point doesn't involve anything practical unless you count feeding my ancestors every day as practical.
Yeah.
Right? It is. Here, Gordon White will spin in his grave. It's devotional, right? I mean, without being, right, the pejorative term that he seems to consider devotionalism.
Well, I think it's devotionalism without giving away your power, and I think a lot of people associate devotionalism with giving up yourself, because devotionalism in the kind of Western Christian sense is largely that.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Right, I had an argument about that just the other day.
Right,
it's definitely got to do a lot with you. But anyway, yeah, that's the best that I can say. Do the work. Do the magic.
Where do people find you? Where can people look at your incense and your art and your writing and your poetry and all of these things?
Right. The easiest place to find me is at my website, which is chariotswheels.com. Spelled exactly like it sounds. No apostrophes, no nothing. Chariotswheels.com. It's been my website for well over a decade. Has links to all the social media there. Of course, you can find me also in the 40 Servants Facebook group,
Indeed,
which is a wonderful and rewarding experience, I must say.
Oh, that's great. And you're also in the Discord as well.
Yes, so I am.
Anywhere at all that people can find you. Well, that was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. I mean, we've been speaking for years at this point, but this is the first time we actually spoke face to face, even though it's Skype, I suppose. But it's I keep wanting to say in the flesh, but it's not in the flesh either. But it's definitely different from typing out on private messages or emails. I just say it's like showing up in a sense. Which I enjoyed very much.
It definitely is, right? And I don't know if you remember, but I said that we needed to do this.
Yes, that definitely, yeah. And it's something that's, in a sense, that's me showing up a bit, because it was probably me being less kind of receptive to that kind of stuff. But you know, we all have to get out of our comfort zones every now and again too. So, but I tell you, you know, I'm glad I do it. I really enjoyed this, and I'm glad to know you. I'm glad to know more about you than I did before we started this.
Absolutely, this was great.
And we'll do it again. We will do it again. So that's us for now, and talk to you all soon.
All right.